You're listening to On the Job with PORAC, hosted by PORAC President Brian Marvel and Vice President Ben Therriault. On the Job with PORAC is your go-to podcast for insights into the challenges and opportunities facing law enforcement professionals here in California and across the nation. Our goal is to provide an inside look at these issues from the perspective of officers who risk their lives to protect and serve their communities.
Welcome to On the Job with PORAC, your inside look at the pressing issues facing law enforcement in California. I'm Brian Marvel, joined by my co-host Ben Therriault. On this episode, we're discussing the end of the legislative session in Sacramento. We're happy to have our legislative advocate, Randy Perry from Aaron Reed & Associates, hands down, if not the best advocate and lobbyist at the Capitol, and he works for PORAC. Randy is our tip of the spear of our political efforts. As I always say, we're grateful he works for us. Thank you for coming in today, Randy. So why don't we get started on this wrap-up of the last two-year session?
Absolutely. So as folks may or may not know, the legislative system is a two-year program. So the 23-24 session is how we do our program. So a bill that doesn't make it in its first year, but makes it to the first house, makes it to the second house, will automatically continue the second year. So like I said, it's a two-year program. So if we have a position in the first year on a bill, that position continues unless they amend the bill favorably, then we will continue that opposition in year two. So when we look at the wrap-up of a two-year session, we go back 2 years to see how we did. This two-year session was a continuation of the last decade of us having to be on the defensive. However, if you look at how we did the last 2 years, it was a very successful two-year program. We had over 50 bills that we were opposing this year, last 2 years. And we successfully killed nearly every single bill or had them amended favorably to where we removed our opposition. Only 1 or 2 bills made it to the governor this year. Only 1 bill was signed by the governor that we opposed. And it was amended quite a bit from where our original position was.
Yeah, and I think people don't realize the amount of work that's required to one, you have to watch the bills being introduced, and then you monitor them from that point. But then with the amendments, and the changes, our input, other people's inputs, it's just this constant monitoring and evaluating and trying to, talk to the legislators to say, hey, these are our concerns or issues regarding some of these bills. It's an incredible amount of work, and it really is a team effort in regards to making sure that you stay on top of it, because we're monitoring anywhere between 250 400 bills sometimes
in a two-year program. There are over 5,000 bills introduced, and we have to read every one of them because you can put language that we like or don't like into any bill. And remember, they can also completely gut a bill and drop language into it anytime they want. So we have to read every amended version of those 5,000 bills. And some bills are amended 10 times. So that's 10 different versions of just one bill that we have to read. So what we do, and like you said, a team effort, Brian, what we do is we do the initial reading and we narrow those down and we send them over to you guys. And you guys do a great job of immediately getting back to us with, questions. What about this? Can you get us more information? And then PORAC takes the positions on the bills. We simply carry out your direction.
No, absolutely. And a lot of it's brought back to the, full board of directors of the executive committee for active supports, active opposes. And it's just a tremendous amount of work to manage this. And then this doesn't include our federal piece that we have to work on top of that. So obviously California is vitally important to us in the interests of PORAC and our members, the law enforcement profession, and public safety. And, before we started here, we were just talking about some of the incidents over the last several years. And Randy's right. I mean, it's literally been a decade of us being on the defense on a lot of this.
Since Ferguson.
Yeah.
There's a lot to monitor. There's a lot of places to juggle, a lot of things to act. I mean, and I think sometimes even some things, it's hard to keep track of everything, and then also to disseminate that to the membership, and then get the active back and forth between the different areas of the state of California and people's input. It gets a lot to juggle.
Well, I will tell you, and I've said this before, what I truly appreciate about PORAC is that the members of PORAC, the board, the leadership, the executive committee, and you two, you don't bury your heads in the sand when there's adversity. You guys step up, you're at the table, and you're not only at the table, but you seek out the table. And that makes me very proud. It allows me to get to the table with you, and we negotiate. We don't say, just say no, just say no. That doesn't work, because then you get steamrolled. And we've seen that. And we all know organizations, we won't mention, but we know organizations who just say no, and they get steamrolled. And people don't respect them, and they definitely don't go to them any longer, because they know they won't get any help. We're at the table, and we try. And, sometimes we just have to say no. Sometimes it's going to impact our members, so negatively. We just say no. Let's go head to head. But most of the time, there is movement. There is a place where we can get to, because they're introducing, for example, a bill that they don't know how it works. They're saying, oh, that sounds good. Let's completely eliminate consent searches. Well, they don't understand how that works. And so once we sit down with them and say, look, if you do that, you're putting people in danger. We can't go to court every time you just stop someone on the street to get a search if they say no. You can't do that. That's dangerous. What if they're armed? So they don't get that. So once we're able to sit down with them, explain how it really works from a law enforcement point of view, most times we can get them to back off and take amendments that we like.
Right. There's obviously some people who are not, as reasonable, but I think a vast majority of folks in the legislature are. Back to your point about, what matters in Sacramento, having been around for a few years now, you can tell the difference from, their interaction with PORAC and other groups and other even large associations. They definitely have sway in their regions and their area, but when it comes to stuff in Sacramento, that's the only thing people ask about is, well, what's PORAC's position on this? That's it. And I think that kind of rubs some people the wrong way, but I think it's a testament to our membership and how they interact in our bottom up approach to making sure that people have involvement and say in the game and where we're going. And part of it also too is explaining the process to cops and public safety professionals. This is how it works in SAC. And that's hard. It's difficult because there's a lot of moving pieces over there. There's always inside baseball and things behind the scene that maybe can't be articulated to folks. And it's so it's a lot to soak up, and then a lot to disseminate and push out to people.
Why don't we go over some of the bills that we had some success on? We could start with AB 93, which is the consensual search bill.
Yeah, I mean, I won't go into too much detail because there were so many bills over the last 2 years, but I mean, AB 93, it would have banned consent searches. It would have basically said that if you stop someone either on the street, walking, or in a car, that if they didn't you had to advise them, they don't have to allow you to search them. If they say no, you can't search. You couldn't do it without a court order. So you would have to sit there and hold that vehicle somehow, or just let them go until somebody went to court and brought back. It was ridiculous. So we sat down with them and we explained, and we said, look, we even have language that we think could work. And they didn't want to do that. They just tried to bring the bill up. So we smoked it.
Like a lot of some of these bills, that one is this is an idea that is planted in the seed of where that comes from groups like Campaign Zero, other groups from the
right.
Quite far left, and folks who don't like law enforcement that was like, hey, this is a bad thing. Why? Because cops are out there doing things on the under or something shady, and it's just not true. And that's where all this comes from.
Another bill, the canine stuff. The original canine bill introduced banning the use of canines except for drug searches. You can't. So my immediate question was, that dark alley where the guy's down there with a firearm, You have to send a cop down there instead of a dog into a house, into an apartment complex. I mean, really? That's what we want to get to now? And so it was a major battle, but there's, a prime example of not knowing how it works. And, bringing up, they were showing, the video from the 1968 Democratic Convention that we've all seen a million times where the cop has the dog biting the African American, which is bad, crowd control. But that's what the video they kept using from 1968. So anyway, that's another example.
Nobody even really does that. It's just ridiculous that they continue to use imagery from days long past where policies and procedures in 2024 do not stipulate that they can use the dogs that way.
Another bill by Dr. Weber, mandating police review boards for every city and county in California, even if you already had police review board. This was in addition to that police review board. I mean, this one we were going to kill just on cost to the local governments, right? I mean, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, and you have some places already have 2, like San Diego. So this would have been a third. You'd have 3 independent agencies dictating to the law enforcement how to do their job. I mean, it's like
on the same potential incident, on the same officer.
Yeah. So you could have 2 of them coming up with different rulings, and the third one would be opposite to their ruling.
In addition to the department's investigation themselves, and maybe the DA's investigation, right?
I look at stuff like this, and it's
5 investigations for one critical incident.
Yeah,
right.
It's just
nuts.
It's just all they're trying to do is stifle the ability of law enforcement to do its job and keep their community safe.
In my opinion, what I actually said in committee is they're shopping for the right answer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, it's like, well, that didn't work out, so we need to go do something else because it didn't get us what we wanted. And they're like, well, I'm sorry, what you wanted isn't the truth.
Yeah. So then they can go to the AG after that. They can go keep until they get the right, conclusion.
It's like body-worn cameras. They introduced body-worn cameras. There was a little bit of resistance from some law enforcement agencies, but now everybody's like, I'll take the body-worn camera. And now it's not proving what the activists thought it would. It's actually supporting and bolstering law enforcement's position that they're doing the job well, they're doing it effectively. So now they're like, we need to get rid of body-worn cameras because this isn't really helping us.
Yeah, it's not. It was supposed to reduce use of force. It's like, well, it's not, because the people who are still trying to get away or hurt law enforcement or fight law enforcement to get away, whatever. I mean, they're still doing that. And all it does, it like that. Remember, that was it was the panacea. Is like it's going to end it all. Like, no, you're just full of garbage and you don't know what you're talking about.
Which is interesting too, because when Dr. Weber Sr., who's now our Secretary of State, first introduced the bill on mandatory body cams, PORAC got together all their panel attorneys here in Sacramento at the headquarters, and we went over the issue and said, where should we be? They all said we should fully support this because 95% of the time it is going to help exonerate peace officers. 100%. And that 5%, well, those officers shouldn't be doing what they did anyway, probably. So it'll help them correct their behavior.
They won't even let you play body cameras in court, like in full length. Like they won't let you have to do like, well, this snippet and what does this part mean and all this stuff. Like, because the music, just hit play. Go ahead and show that to the jury. But they won't let you do that. Why? Because it doesn't help their client because they were doing criminal stuff.
Yeah, and when chiefs and sheriffs started just uploading the body cam footage like the next day to TV, and to people start going, wait.
Well, that's where I give major kudos to the Los Angeles Police Department because the way they roll out their body-worn camera is so effective. Yeah. It is so well done. It literally deflates the people's arguments. And as soon as they started doing that, who was the first one? It was the media. You can't do this because they wanted to be able to plant the narrative. They wanted to be able to narrate how the incident actually happened versus what LAPD is doing. And hands down to them and more agencies to try to do it the way they're doing it because it really deflates the argument in regards to the incident. And it's a huge plus.
Salaciousness sells papers.
Yeah, 100%.
And if you roll that out and it shows that it was by the book, it was warranted, it was done well, done right.
Yeah.
How do you sell
Yeah,
paper?
well, they don't want that because they're selling ads, not the truth.
Yeah.
So a couple of other just quick ones we'll go over, on the opposed side. Then I want to talk about a couple of great successes. SB 50 was Senator Bradford's, limits on stops, minor violations. You can no longer pull somebody over. 94, Senator Cortese, LWOPs and other special circumstance people who are convicted have opportunities to now get out of prison, where maybe they cut the deal from the death penalty. They took an LWOP. That they'd never get out of prison. This bill will now allow them to get out.
That one got kind of close, right?
No.
Okay.
It got
That's
over to
good.
the assembly side, but he
That
never
was
got
it.
close on the votes.
Ah, that's too bad.
He may have been thinking he was close to the votes, but he was not.
I wish we had legislators that worked as vigorously to defend and protect cops as they try to get people out of prison that have done heinous crimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they have one or two, outlier issues where they'll talk about someone who was an accomplice, for example. They didn't pull the trigger, but they're LWOP. Well, you know what? That's the law. I mean, they were part of the thing. They helped plan it, the whole bit. But they use those as the examples, and they have their moms coming up, and they're, crying, my son shouldn't be in prison. They have that. They don't talk about. I mean, they amended their bill. I'll tell you something that just blows me away to this day. And the only thing I had to use to help keep people off that bill, they took amendments to that bill that said, okay, because it allowed serial killers to potentially apply to get out of prison. They said, okay, we'll limit that. You can kill up to 2 people. But anything over 2 people, you couldn't, this bill would
I get 2
apply.
freebies, and then
Yeah.
it's LWOP.
So we had a woman come and testify at our press conference who had her twin boys brutally raped and murdered by someone. So this guy would be able to qualify under this bill. That's all I had to use. That was the one issue.
And again, you're right. And this is with a lot of bills. They roll out anecdotal stories. They're small little things. Oh, I remember with the 3 strikes, it was the guy he stole a pizza, and then boom, it's like, okay, that's a very specific set of circumstances, something. But this is not what's being applied to the whole on people who have done heinous stuff.
They just don't tell you the first 2 crimes was rape, murder, kidnapping, torture, all the other grievous
This was a
crimes.
grand theft, and this is what happened.
Yeah.
Not to mention the other probably 20 crimes that he didn't get charged for, but
Well, and that's just it. They said, well, we also took amendment to get rid of sex crimes. Anything sex crime wouldn't qualify. Well, what they didn't say was when somebody pleads to murder one or somebody pleads to a special circumstance, then the DA will drop all the other the rape and all that because they don't want to put the families through that in court. They already have them on an LWOP. So they're not going to worry about whether rape. You're there for the rest of your life. You can't add to that.
yeah, no, that's a great point.
So then they turn around, and
good
that's
thing.
not part of what they were convicted of when they go before a judge to
Right.
get out.
They never consider the victims in these bills.
They don't.
Never, not
They
once.
do not.
Ever.
They do not.
It's all, hey, I got to support this criminal who did all these heinous
It's the
crimes.
stuff that
Make sure that he gets out.
Totally. I hope that's the what I think we're hoping. I think we're talking about the past decade. Hopefully that's what's turning the corner. And
Well, it is
I just
turning.
think people are just getting fed up.
And that's a good segue. We have seen the last year and a half or 2 years where the public is getting tired. They have seen that people are getting out and offending. They violently. They have seen, here in Sacramento, there was somebody who was let out under a bill that was passed, and as soon as they let out, they went in right here in Lamb Park, which is literally 10 minutes from the Capitol, and went to a woman, an elderly woman living by herself, and not only killed that woman, but killed her dogs. I mean, just brutally murdered her.
Look at George Gascon. He let a guy out. He kills 2 cops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have billionaire elitists in California that are supporting his campaign.
Right.
And it's just ridiculous.
So there, with the sentiment turning, with the ship now starting or the pendulum swinging back, it is now allowing us to start to refocus our legislative program, started this year and next year and in the future, to where we can do less defensive work and start going back to the programs of, we've never stopped looking after our members' benefits, right? And I don't mean benefits in terms of just pensions and work comp, all of that, but their terms and conditions of employment, their safety, making sure their working conditions are safe, taking care of their families if, God forbid, something were to happen to them, making sure their kids will have an education, making sure it's paid for, making sure their spouses are taken care of, their families are taken care of. We've never stopped doing that, but we've had to always, put a big priority of our time into this defense, because as we just went through a very small number of the 10-year bills over the last 10 years, would have absolutely, would have made cops, remember the liability issue, it would have made cops personally liable if you did something wrong where you arrested somebody or you took somebody down and they sued you. They could have gone after you personally. Well, we killed that. But those are the things that would have devastated the law enforcement.
Would have destroyed this profession.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have considered leaving after the use of force.
Absolutely.
The
use of force issue,
control.
It would have devastated the profession. So we are moving forward. We're looking at work comp, looking at, seeing if there needs to be some work comp reform. It's over 10 years old now. PEMCA is over 10 years old now. We need to maybe go back and reevaluate the pension system to see, are we hitting our caps, for example, things of that sort. We now need to go back, look at the presumptions. Are the presumptions covering everybody they need to cover? Do we need other types of injuries that we're now getting and being, that we have to look at? So now we need to go back to evaluating those things. We've had enough time to look at the reforms that occurred a decade ago on our benefits. Do we need to go back and look at those now?
And I think that really comes down to like relationships and developing strong relationships and having people in positions up here at PORAC who know the players and can call them and can have conversations in regards to what Randy's talking about, I think is critically important. Obviously, we've been defense. Now we can move someone on the offense and do these things. So I'm really looking forward to the next legislative cycle on some of the things that we can positively do for our profession, for the communities that we're serving, in a wide capacity of issues, not just the stuff that you were talking about, but just public safety in general. Let's refocus, recalibrate. I think my assessment of the legislature is I think they're a little bit out of step with California as a whole in some of these areas, because I think you see it when we have statewide measures. The state seems to vote for stuff that would never see the light of day in the legislature, the legislative body. And hopefully we can start after this election. There'll be some new folks up here, being able to talk to them. And, you really talked about early on about our ability to want to sit down and have conversations. And that's the way we've always operated since I've been up here is my phrase from Ron DeLorde is you're either at the table or you're on the menu. And being at the table is so critically important. And stuff we have to fight and say no to, obviously, for obvious reasons. But there's a lot of stuff in there we're having conversations and being able to educate. Sometimes people are just coming from this at an angle where they didn't even really think about some of the stuff that we've brought to the table. And it's critically important. And I think the use of force stuff, we were able to sort of pierce through that resistance due to all of the national conversation on public safety and law enforcement, to where the people stepped back and said, hey, you know what, this probably is not a good idea. Let's take a step back and reassess it and talk about it next year, which we did. But it allowed us time to be able to have more discussions with all of the players involved. And it really, I think, preserved our profession, because you're right. I think if some of those bills would have passed in that cycle, recruiting and retention would just be devastating.
Bad now.
Yeah.
So what would have been,
absolutely,
what would have become?
The abolitionists would have been cheering from the street. Like, no more cops. We can commit all the crimes we want, and we want to help our buddies get out of jail. But the reality is the average person that's just out there trying to, do the best for their family, earn a living, be a good person, are going to be the victims. And that's really, I look at what PORAC does is we're that wall to protect them. Because there is a group of people out there that do not care that they're victimized. And that's what we're here for, to stop that.
Like we said earlier, this year the legislature passed all those organized retail theft bills.
Yeah.
You never would have seen that 2 years ago. So there's a perfect example where we've been able to push, forward an offense where we hadn't been able to do it the last decade.
Appreciate it. Well, this wraps up another episode of On the Job with PORAC. We hope this discussion has given you some valuable insights into the complex world of law enforcement policy and politics in California. If you haven't already hit the like button, please do. And while you're at it, share this podcast with friends and family. This helps us spread the word and get recognized. So until next time, keep fighting the good fight and stay safe out there. This is Brian Marvel with Ben Therriault, signing off.